I do want to say that we live in a lucky time. In the Dust Bowl era, when we went through not even a 10-year drought, not even as a severe drought seemingly as what we've gone through in the West recently, they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the resources to create water supply. So millions of people didn't have to move to go chase water and chase jobs. Nothing dried up and went away, although there were some big issues. I think Florida can learn from that. So California was the first one to get really on the news, and here we go. Californians got upset because water restrictions, and on the left panel, they got upset with the rich and famous because they were irrigating their land ponds when others had to reduce their total supply to drink. And then the farmers had cutbacks, which we didn't talk about today, but if we get a big drought in Florida, which will happen, is that an option for us here? That if potable supply goes away for these millions of people coming here, are we going to go into the water banks of the aquifers and say, well, we're going to cut you farmers back? That's what they did in, I know it's Western water law, but that's what they did in California. I hope we don't do what the state reps did in California and blame the drought on abortion. Here in 2011, this is what Lake Oracle looked like. In 2014, that's drastic. Now, we don't have those type reservoirs, but that was pretty drastic. That is what California was looking like, and that is what drove it all the way to Washington, D.C., 32%. Of course, we got national attention. They got national attention for it, all the way to comedians, talking about the drought, talking about climate change. It really woke up the nation, and there was a lot going on in the nation about water and coral reefs. The good thing is, the legislature and everybody was talking about creating drought-proof water supplies. We've talked about it a lot in Florida, you've heard it, but drought-proof water supplies. So California launched into a long process to create coral reefs, make it legal. They're still working on it. Water Reuse Association pulled together $6 million to do research to help that along, not only research but advocacy with the state of California. We're going to have a report out in 2016, so that's moving along. The research is really going well, and hope to have some movement. But that is probably the hardest place you could permit one of these projects. We have a gentleman from Texas that might be one of the easier places to permit. We'll talk about that. Maybe we can learn something from Texas. Here's a picture of the drought. So there were articles that it wasn't just a California drought, even though almost 60% of California was in an extreme or exceptional drought, but it stretched to Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. And obviously Texas had a fairly severe drought. So what was Texas' answer? It was reefs. Here's the articles, the national articles in Texas, because they went directly to it. They didn't start studying it. They said, we need it. I was talking to Russell, and he said, we were out of water. No, we don't have stormwater like you guys had. We were out of water. So their answer was coral reefs, and not only indirect coral reefs, but direct coral reefs. So we'll see this again. Pull at the tap, pull at the tap. I know we all get tired of it. We heard the ag presentation today. The yuck factor, same thing. We need to educate people. We need to band together this organization, our organization, all the professionals, the state DP, creatively come up with an education program to educate people. I'm going to mention the Segway for 1 second, because when I left my utility, a gentleman came back to my utility from a 6-month sabbatical. He went to India. We talked about India for about 30 seconds, and he stopped and he said, you know the most important thing I learned? No, what? And he's a financial guy. He's not even a water guy in the water utility. He's a financial guy. He said, I learned about water, and I learned that everywhere else you go in this world, people know more about water, have to know more about water than the United States. When we travel, we bought water and we were careful to buy water. He said, you even had to be careful buying bottled water because people in other countries will take bottled water and throw it away, fill it up with water and resell it, put the cap back on it, you don't know what's in it. He said you had to look at the cap to make sure it was actually water from a water company. He said nobody, nowhere you travel, knows less about water quality than Americans. And the first thing he and his wife did when they came back to the States was drink water out of a water fountain. Nowhere else would he do it. So it just says we need to educate our people. We've done too good a job. Our treatment systems, our delivery systems are too reliable for them to have, and too cheap for them to have knowledge about it. They don't. San Diego said, get over it. Luckily, San Diego educated their people. And even the news said, get over the yuck factor. Just get over it. Time to. I don't put this in the wrong place. I'm sorry. Come back to that. Well, I can go over it. Anyway, this is, so I mentioned that Texas took the lead. Here it is. Look at these treatment plants. I've got a question for Russell because I'm looking at this when you get up on a panel, and that is everybody wants to go to high levels of treatment, and you went to a high level. But when I look at it, Big Springs, they were the first, and they've got MFRO, UB, AOP, Wichita, you guys second, but no AOP. It's interesting that you didn't have the AOP on there, so I'm going to ask that. I want you to address that. So they jumped out front. How did they jump out front? Well, I'm not going to answer that because we've got the expert here, Russell, who will talk about it a little bit. Here's what they experienced. And by the way, I believe this Lake Arrowhead, isn't that your reservoir? Isn't that Wichita's water supply? So here it was. Here it is full. Here's the rest of Texas. You can see this is what's interesting. In 1 month, or about 15 days, they went from 50,000 acre feet to over 240,000 acre feet into a flood stage. So they recovered. And what they do, they turn their plane off, right? You got plenty of water. But he's going to indirect coal reefs and address that. But is the drought over? Or are droughts over? Now here I'm getting into some interesting stuff that I found out from California and out west. These are western states. Because they have trees older than any trees in Florida that I found. Tree ring surveys show us that the recent 15 years of drought, 49% of the western states have been in drought. More than any other time in history since the medieval times of 1159. That's the only other time more of the western United States has been in drought. So what does that mean? Let's look at this. I think this is, if there's any factor to push the United States, and especially the western states, the coral reefs, it's this. Here's this recent drought we're talking about, how bad it was. Look at these droughts. Over 200-year droughts and severe droughts. So more severe and longer than what we just experienced. With all the population moving to California, they've got some real issues. And we have what? Population moving here. We have some real issues. So this shows that they need to do some planning. And I'll tell you, this shows we need to do some planning. Because even though California, these are drivers for California, that they're in the 40 to 50 percentile range of another decade-long drought. Texas is even worse. They're in the 80 to 78, 80 to 90%. I wouldn't poo-poo a 20 to 30% chance. We're going to get it. It's going to happen. Whether we're sitting in this room and we're going to enter it, or it's the next generation of people coming in. It's going to happen here, and we need to be prepared. So around the country, I think everybody here is familiar with Florida, what we're doing, and Clearwater's got the first demonstration project. We're going to have David Porter up here a little bit on the panel to talk about that. Here's Colorado's starting with white paper they're interested in. Arizona started a steering committee. They're working through the last few years of that steering committee to bring on coral reefs and great coral reefs. Right now, regulatorily, it's outlawed to do direct coral reefs in the state of Arizona. California, we talked about that. It's, of course, coming due. Advisory panel. By the way, there's a big national bill with Feinstein, if you want to look into that, to address the drought and address these water supply issues. A lot of work up in Congress to get water. But the readdress, we talked, and this always comes up over and over again. We got to educate the public. And one of the things that we all know in this room is we'll never get to zero, or we can get to zero today, but the laboratories are going to figure out ways to measure it in smaller and smaller amounts, and it'll never be zero. So somehow, we got to come up with a way to communicate to people that everything in this room that you have on your desk, the Cokes, the Mountain Dews, everything else we eat, it's got impurities in it. Why is it just water? We're going to look underneath the microscope and make sure it's got to be pure, but nothing else has to be pure. And that's an issue that we need to somehow smartly address. Just one announcement that 20 September, Water Use Symposium, and thank you to Tech and Xylem. We're working on the first annual DPR beer contest. So if we have beer drinkers out here, we'll need some judges, and we're going to have a fun time in September. So I hope everybody can come to Tampa in September. Now, Amy will give you a more update on Florida. Yeah.
It's not often that I get an opportunity to preach to the choir. Most of the time when I talk, everybody's lining up to tell me how wrong I am and all the misgivings that they have about whatever it is that I'm talking about. And I might be scarred as a former DEP basin coordinator, but we won't go into that today. Let's talk about reuse. So necessity is for innovation, right? We typically don't do things unless we absolutely have to, as is occurring out in the western states. But we do have initiative. I mean, we all know that we have some areas of the state that we need to be paying attention to, and we're already engaged in those areas. And this is the slide we all love to hate, right? So I like this slide because it shows 40 years of reuse. It's investment. That's the purple dots on the map. I also like this slide because it shows what we are doing, but it's also an opportunity because 55% of our reuse is not being utilized, and I think that's where we're all looking to go. This is a great start. Senate Bill 536 has got us talking. It's got the legislature talking. We're talking about projects. We're talking about funding. We're talking about barriers, regulations. This is a wonderful way to support our community in the next steps, but we can't let it stop here. And Senator Simpson talked a little bit about what he sees the next steps and that he's looking to engage our community. So what are we doing? What does that bill talk about? I like to call these the cornerstones. As a geographer, I have to talk about the regional areas of the state. Broward County, they're doing some things. They have some barriers, just like we all do, but they're doing a serious master planning. So they are really beginning to look at where they are, where they need to go, where their needs are, and how to get there. And the nice thing about the initiative that they've taken, as this road begins to unravel for them and they're getting on their path, is that the engineering costs should begin to be reduced slightly. Smart move. Nutrient cycling in a reuse distribution system. We believe this is really a big conversation that we should all be having. So Aubrey has shown that in end of pipe and end of sprinkler are two different concentrations. So my question is to you in your own distribution system, your end of pipe and your sprinkler head, what is the difference between the two? And I think we really need to be talking about that when we're taking a look at what happens once it leaves the sprinkler head, how much of it is getting into our waterways. We also need to have an understanding of what is that concentration at the point of actual quote-unquote discharge, not just at the pipe. We need some sampling. And we interrupt our regularly scheduled program to talk about environmental impacts because, I mean, come on. We can't be talking about supply without be talking about the environment. And it's just not going to happen anymore. We've seen the water management districts and DEP come together. They're doing much better at a comprehensive policy. We need to get on that bandwagon as well. Northeast Florida, Clay County's got some rigs coming up, and talking about environmental, it's going to be reducing a significant amount of nitrogen loading to the St. Johns River that is not meeting its TMDL as of yet. And then we have the town of Nocatee, and I've got a lot of flack for this. We're like, come on, really? Stormwater harvesting in a private development? Yes, absolutely, because once private development says that, hey, this is cost feasible, they're going to get buy-in. Showers for flowers in Florida is not dead. Okay, it is still a tool in the toolbox. It depends on your community. Regional partnerships, really, I think at the end of the day, what's important about this is reuse supported PICO's growth objectives. That's important. If we're going to be a healthy economy, this is part of that solution. First, we've all heard about it. Joanne's going to really give us some more information today. And I have Reedy Creek up here because what I like about this is that is over 20 years of rapid infiltration. So this is, when we're talking with our communities about aquifer recharge and all these wonderful little tidbits that we have, I like to say we've been doing it for over 20 years. This is not new technology. We really have to do a good job at helping our public to understand that we're not doing crazy things, that we're doing things that we've been doing for a long time with great success and no benefit or no harm to our communities. Okay, so this is kind of the powerhouse, we all know, and the Southwest area is doing some wonderful things, and we're definitely looking to them to help us understand what makes sense in other parts of the state. Clearwater has recently been in the news. Hooray! We looked at the Facebook, we looked at, and this is a wonderful example of how difficult our road is going to be in public education. We had this is a good idea, and we had the naysayers that said, oh my gosh, we're all going to die. So, it's been interesting, but thank you for being the leader. City of Tampa Reclaim Water Augmentation Project, I think David is here. He's working on that, as a matter of fact. There you are. And this is up and going, right? This is no longer just discussing, we're talking about it, we're moving, we're doing things now, so this is exciting, right? Sharp, indirect portable reuse, saltwater intrusion, this is really the poster child for the multi-benefit project. There's just no getting around that. This is the fun part, right? The action items for our community, our reuse community. We need to get some pilot projects in mind. We need to help our regulatory agencies define our regulations. Okay, they're willing to work with us. We need to bring something to the table so that we can help guide that policy in a common sense way so that what gets adopted doesn't have to be modified. It's done right the first time. Connect our environmental protection to our projects. Identify your partnering opportunities. We can't be separate anymore. It's important that we take a look, and it might be simple. Invest in upgrading the quality of my reuse. So we need to, can we have a reusematch.com too? And then to lay the groundwork for project funding needs. We are not really good at self-promotion at all. We need to get better at it. So I'm not advocating that this is what we do, but I will say San Francisco has been extremely successful in their public education campaign, and what they've done through these kinds of educational campaigns on the bus, social media, in the paper, we laugh about it, it's humorous. But what it did was their community said, yes, it's important that we put our funding to this. This is important to our community. And we as a reuse community need to support our legislature. If they want to give us money, we have to make sure that when they're ready to do that, that the rest of the state, their constituents, our customers and neighbors support it as well. And that's my 2 cents.